Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and finally getting back to doing some Halloween cards. And for today's card, I started off with the Crazy Cats stamp set and Crazy Things stamp set by Tim Holtz. And I have some Canson XL watercolor paper here and the basic rectangle dies from Simon Says Stamp. And I have the second largest die, because that was going to be my plan, is to cut this out. And my original plan was to do the orientation like this, and you can see I was struggling trying to fit both these images where I wanted them. So then I flipped this over and then decided that this was going to work. So I'm going to ink up both of these images with VersaFine Onyx Black ink, and I'm leaving the die in place so that I get these stamped where I want them, so that later when I die cut I don't end up die cutting off part of the image or whatever. So I inked it up really well with VersaFine Onyx Black and then stamped that onto the watercolor paper, and then I inked up the little pumpkin container here, little trick-or-treat container, and stamped that as well. I thought those were just perfect together. Like, the cat looks so exactly like how a cat would be around a strange item. So got those both stamped, and then before removing the die I quickly traced around the perimeter of it with a pencil, because I wasn't sure how I was going to do my watercoloring, like whether I wanted to keep it contained within the pencil line or just do a flat wash, you know. So that just gave me a visual guide before I actually got to the watercoloring. So once I did that, I taped down this piece with painter's tape onto a masonite board. And then I am using my Mission Gold watercolors to do all the watercoloring, and I've sped this up about, this is like 4 times faster than what it actually took me. It didn't take me super long because I didn't do super fancy watercoloring. I started off with the ground of this image, and when I started, you know, kind of lower, and then as I was doing it I realized the back foot of the cat was a lot higher. So I started off with this, and then you'll see I start extending it a little bit higher here and there just to level this out a bit so it doesn't look like he's got a back foot just kind of floating in the air. So I'm using a silver size 6 watercolor brush for all of this watercoloring. I'm not doing anything super fancy. You know, you could really get into like layering different layers of color and all that kind of stuff to create, you know, a phenomenal image. For me, my main goal usually is just to get the color down. So I did the ground first, and then I mixed up kind of like a beige color. You'll see in a bit the pattern paper I chose had this strip of beige in it, and I was like, I wanted to kind of match that for the background. So I mixed up a few colors and got it really watered down, and then I used my heat tool to dry the ground area there because I didn't want them to start bleeding into each other. And then I just quickly did the background, trying to keep it all the edges wet so that I don't end up with spots, but at the same time, like I said, I don't worry about it too much with my watercoloring. I'm more into getting just the color down, and it's not a big fancy whatever, it's a card. So once I did the background though, I made sure it was completely dry, and then I spritzed it with my distress sprayer and let that sit for just a little bit. I didn't let it sit for too long. You can see more at the end though. It just created that fun kind of splattery effect with the water. And then I dried that again with my heat tool, and then I went on to watercolor in the cat, which I get simple, very simple. I just watered down the black watercolor and started with a base of that just to make this cat gray. And then I just used deeper concentrations of the exact same color, just adding a bit more of the actual watercolor itself to do the little stripes and whatnot. And I did that while everything was wet, so it's all kind of like bleeding into each other, but I wanted it like that. I didn't want like really harsh lines or anything. So I just kind of went back and forth and kept deepening up all these areas of the cat just to give him a little bit more character. And decided just to keep it, all one color. I didn't bother mixing colors and all that sort of thing. I wanted to keep this as simple as possible. So once I got his little body done, I mixed up some colors to create an orange and painted the pumpkin, and I had a little bit too much going on in my brush, so I just dabbed off some of the excess moisture there so I could pick it up so it wasn't just a big blob of color there. And then added a little bit more concentration to the edges. That's one thing I really like about these stamps, with just the way they're drawn and the lines of them. It gives you visual clues as to where to put the darker areas. You know, they kind of take care of the work for you. You don't have to think as much. So once I was done with the pumpkin, I went back and added just a little bit more to the cat, just deepened up some little areas of his little stripes and around his face and his little paws and things like that, just to give it a little bit more character. And then I added a tiny bit more to the pumpkin And that ended up finishing this off basically. So what I decided to do, because I'm obsessed, I wanted to add some splatter, but I didn't want to coat the cat or the pumpkin. So what I ended up doing was pulling out the dies. I had got these, I don't even know how long ago, but these are the Sizzix Crazy Cats dies. And I just started lining them up because there's a ton of dies in the package and it's kind of confusing as to what on earth is going on. But the one thing I figured out with all of these dies is there's multiple dies for each image. So you have all the main dies for, you know, to cut out the outline of each cat. And then with this set specifically, there's 2 extra dies for each image. So there's a die for the eyes and there's a die for the tail. So you can create these dimensional fun images. It's really cool. And I had planned on doing that for this card, but decided to keep it a bit simpler. But it's really neat to see what you can do with these. And another thing about these dies is they do cut right on the line. So that is something I know a lot of people prefer. They don't like having that outline that most coordinating dies do. So this is something different. So I thought I would just include that info in this video because I wasn't aware of that until maybe about a year ago. I'm not sure. I never knew that until I saw, I'm pretty sure it was Christina Werner use one of the coordinating die sets. I think it was with the Crazy Bird set. And when she showed that, I was like, oh, now it all makes sense. So I lined up all these dies with their images just so I could see what on earth I was working with here. And then once I had kind of figured that out, I had actually done this at the beginning, but I just decided to include this clip now just to figure out kind of where everything was. And then I didn't have a chance. I had meant to kind of put these in little pockets or something so I had each one separately so I don't have to do this every single time, you know, but hindsight as always. But my main thing was I just wanted that cat die, the similar one to what I already had stamped on my image. So I took just that cat die and I ran it through my die cut machine with just a piece of copy paper. You could do it with masking paper if you wanted, but I misplaced my masking paper and couldn't find it. So I just cut a piece of just printer paper with that die. And then I'm just going to use some of my Tombow Monomulti. I don't know if I've ever shown this before, but the reason why it's called Monomulti is it's a semi-permanent as well as a permanent adhesive. So I put dabs of this on the back of this copy paper here, just really lightly, and I'm going to let it dry before using it. And if you let it dry before you adhere it to a project, it turns into a repositionable adhesive. So you can basically create your own masks with it. It works totally fine like that. So I did that with the cat one, and then for the pumpkin one, because I didn't have the coordinating die, I just quickly trimmed this out because it only took like 2 seconds. So I stamped it onto the same copy paper and quickly trimmed it out. I left off the handle because I wasn't going to bother trimming all around that. I was like, it doesn't really matter anyway. And then did the same thing. Added a little bit of the adhesive, like really thinly on the back, and then you just let it dry. So you want to make sure too that it is completely dry and it's not still liquid adhesive, because otherwise you're going to permanently adhere those masks to your project and you don't want that. So as those were drying, I peeled off all of the painter's tape from my image. I've said this before, it works really well if you pull the tape basically against itself to prevent any tearing. I wasn't too worried about it with this because I didn't go all the way to the edges with the water, and I knew I was going to die cut it, but it still is, you know, helpful to be a bit careful. And then I made sure the adhesive was tacky and not liquid anymore, and then I can just adhere that right over top so I can protect both of those images. And then I got out my little splatter cubby, of course. I haven't even bothered cleaning it from the last project. I'm just leaving it out now because it just comes in so handy. And then I just mixed up some of the same black watercolor on an acrylic block and splattered that across my little painting here with the same brush. And then pulled off both those masks. They came off perfectly. I just used my scissors to just get right under the edges there because the watercolor was still wet. And then I let those splatters completely dry. I actually sped that up with my heat tool too. I just didn't include that in the video. So let that dry, and then I grabbed that same die I used in the beginning, and then I'm going to tape it into place with the same painter's tape so that this doesn't shift when I run it through my Big Shot machine, because that's the last thing you want after you've gone to all that work, and then it cuts crooked or cuts part of the image off. Ugh. It's happened. It's not fun. So die cut that, and then I grabbed a sentiment from the Crazy Talk sentiment set, the Trick or Treat sentiment, of course. I love just the way the font is of these as well. It just works with these goofy images. I love it. I just love it. So I inked that up with the same VersaFine Onyx Black and stamped that onto the panel. And then for my pattern paper that I'd mentioned, this is the My Mind's Eye Happy Haunting that I showed in a haul a month or two ago, whenever. But yeah, that's what inspired the colors. The more warm and neutral color palette that I chose. These papers were kind of what inspired it. So I die cut the chevron paper with the largest die from the Simon Says Stamp Basic Rectangle set. And then I cut down some steel gray cardstock from MFT, and I cut it down to 5.5 by 8.5 inches. Yes, and scored it 4 1/4. So it's a top folding A2 sized card. And then I use my Tombow Monomulti again to adhere the pattern paper, this time adhering it in its liquid form, so it is permanent. I've had people ask me a lot lately, like, why I like this adhesive so much, and I love it because it's just fabulous. And it is permanent. Like, when it is dry, you are not pulling that apart without tearing the cardstock. And it also doesn't buckle. Like, I don't apply like large amounts of it. You don't need very much. A really thin line does the trick. And it doesn't create any wrinkling or buckling in your cardstock, which is a big deal. I've been using this stuff for years, so I don't even think about it anymore. I usually would buy it in bulk, like a caseload at a time. Best adhesive ever. So anyway, the inside I finished with another pattern paper from the pack, and then I'd stamped the Happy Halloween sentiment onto it, and then just adhered it, and that just made my inside quick and easy. And then to finish this off, I wanted to bling up the little pumpkin a bit more. So I used my orange Wink of Stella. I shook it up really well because it's been sitting for quite some time, and just coated it. So it made the pumpkin more orange, obviously. You could use the clear if you wanted, but I kind of wanted it to be a little more orange and a little more, you know, pop a little bit more to give the cat something to be leery about. And then I also added some glossy accents to his eyes to give it that extra little something as well. And then that was it for this card. I had adhered that main panel to the card with a bunch of foam tape, and I kept it just simple and fun. Since all the work went into the watercoloring, I decided not to add any more embellishments. I just wanted the, you know, glittery, glossy pumpkin and his funny little eyes to kind of steal the show, and leave it at that. So as always, I will have links below the video to my blog post, as well as links to all the supplies used, and I will have links here at the end of the video to 2 of the other Halloween cards I did for this series. Thank you guys so much for watching and subscribing, thumbs upping, and commenting on my videos, and I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye!